Well, hello there, my Facebook friends and family. Welcome to another wonderful opportunity to experience the Word of God a chapter at a time. Throughout this month of January, we have been cruising our way through the book of Proverbs, and we're going to continue on that journey here today. We're taking a proverb a day. Proverbs is a great book of wisdom. It gives insight and instruction for us living and being aligned with God's will and according to God's order. And so we are going to continue on our journey here on this 8th day. We are entering in week 2 of this new calendar year. Week 2 out of 52. We still, and so we got a long way to go in this new year. But we know times keep on shifting into the future. And so with that being said, let us just go right on into our reading for today. Uh, our overview of our reading as we're going to discuss the difference here, this wise versus fool. It is one of the central themes of Proverbs. It is not the central theme, but a central theme of Proverbs. I have noticed that there is this comparison about the wise and the fool in the book of Proverbs. Here's an overall description of this here. It seems to be one of the most dominant themes of the book of Proverbs, and it is that contrast between the wise and the fool. This contrast, it is not about intelligence. It is not about education. It is not even about social status. It is about orientating or the orientation toward God and our response to his instruction. When we begin to look at these things, or just to give some definition, the wise here is the person who have this reverence of the Lord. They have reverence for his authority and is willing to submit to his instruction. The wise is someone who is teachable, who is disciplined, and who is responsive to correction. The wise man lives out wisdom in his daily decisions, in his daily speech, in his relationships, and he lives it out in daily integrity. The wise person understands that that life works best when it is aligned with God's design. On the other hand, we have the fool. This fool, it is not someone that is lacking mental capacity, but one who rejects God's wisdom, a person who resists correction, who trusts in himself or herself more than God, one who lives impulsively. The fool often dismisses the consequences until it is too late. The foolish person in Proverbs is moral, and it signifies a person that is morally and spiritual rebellious, not just someone that is ignorant. Why does this theme matter in the Proverbs? Well, Proverbs present life as a series of choices between two paths. The way of wisdom that leads to life, it leads to stability, it leads to peace. And then there also the path of the folly that leads to confusion, leads to loss, and leads to destruction. So the wise versus the fool contrast helps readers recognize that character shapes our destiny. Choices reveal our allegiance. It reveals whether our allegiance is to God or if our allegiance is to ourselves. Why did this matter to the original audience? For Israel, wisdom was essential in three primary areas. First of all, to deal with covenantal faithfulness. Wisdom helped God's people live distinctly in a surrounding pagan culture. Secondly, it provided community stability. Try to say that a lot of times fast. Community stability. Wise living preserved families. It preserved justice. It preserved social order. But then beyond covenantal faithfulness and community stability, it also provides generational instruction. Parents was instructed to pass wisdom to children to sustain faith across generation. Um, in a um, um, in an agrarian world, in a communal society, foolishness affected not just individuals, but entire households and communities. Wisdom was needed for survival. And before we get into the overview of Proverbs 8, we're going to take this in a different manner, and we're going to actually read Proverbs 8, and then we'll come back through and comb through and see the overarching themes that we could find in this book. And so we're going to go to this book of Proverbs, or this Proverbs 8, and we're going to read it in its entirety, and then we'll expound upon it briefly. Here it is, Proverbs 8 out of the English Standard Version. This is how the Word of God reads. Does not wisdom call? Does not understanding raise her voice? On the heights beside the way, at the crossroads, she takes her stand. Beside the gates in front of the town, at the entrance of the portals, she cries aloud. To you, O man, I cry, and my cry is to the children of men. O simple ones, learn prudence. O fools, learn sense. Hear, for I will speak noble things. From my lips will come what is right. Uh-oh, hold on, I can't get it to move. Let's try that again. All right. And for my mouth will utter truth. Wickedness is an abomination to my lips. All the words of my mouth are righteous. There is nothing twisted or crooked in them. They are all straight to him who understands, and right to those who find knowledge. Take my instructions instead of silver, and knowledge rather than choice gold. Why? Because am I paraphrasing? Verse 11, let me start that off. Verse 11 says, for wisdom is better than jewels, and all that you may desire cannot compare with her. I, wisdom, dwell with prudence, and I find knowledge and discretion. The fear of the Lord is hatred of evil, pride and arrogance, and the way of evil and perverted speech I hate. I have counsel and sound wisdom. I have insight. I have strength. By me, kings reign and rulers decree what is just. By my princes rule. By me, princes rule, and nobles are all who govern justly. I love those who love me, and those who seek me diligently find me. Riches and honor are with me, enduring wealth and righteousness. My fruit is better than gold, even fine gold, and my yield than choice silver. I walk in the way of righteous, in the paths of justice, granting an inheritance to those who love me, and filling their treasures. The Lord possesses me at the beginning of his work, at the first of his acts of old. Ages ago, I was set up at the first, before the beginning of the earth. When there was no depths, I was brought forth. When there was no springs abounding with water, before the mountains had been shaped, before the hills, I was brought forth. Before he had made the earth with its fields, or the fields of the dust of the world. When he established the heavens, I was there. When he drew a circle on the face of the deep, when he made firm the skies above, when he established the fountains of the deep, when he assigned to the sea its limits, so that the waters might not transgress his commands, when he marked out the foundations of the earth, then I was beside him like a master workman, and I was daily his delight. Rejoicing before him always, rejoicing in his inhabited world, and delighting in the children of man. And now, O sons, listen to me. Blessed are those who keep my ways. Hear instruction and be wise. Do not neglect it. Blessed is the one who listens to me, watching daily at my gates, waiting beside my doors. For whoever finds me finds life and obtains favor from the Lord. But he who fails to find me injures himself, and all who hate me loves death. That is Proverbs number 8 in its entirety, 39 verses there. So now let us come back through and just take a brief overview of what Proverbs 8 is all about. If we could give a title to this chapter or to this proverb, it would simply be Wisdom's Public Call. Why? Because Proverbs 8 it takes wisdom and makes it a person. It describes it as a woman calling out publicly. It is inviting all people to listen, but not just to listen, but also to live. This chapter reveals that wisdom is rooted in God's character and creation, and not by human invention. Wisdom, first of all, we see that wisdom calls to everyone. Verses 1 through 11, it talks about wisdom speak openly in public spaces. She's not hidden or reserved for the elites. It shows us that God's wisdom is accessible to all who are willing to listen. It highlights that true riches are not material, but moral and spiritual understanding. And then we move into verses 12 through 21, where it highlights wisdom that offers moral insight. As it talks about wisdom that provides prudence, justice, righteousness, and sound judgments. It challenges leaders and rulers, or should I say not challenges them, but it highlights that leaders and rulers govern rightly when they submit to wisdom. And it also shows us that wisdom aligns authority with responsibility. Here's the part that almost excited me, shouted me out of my seat. When in verses 22 through 31, that talks about or deals with the wisdom role in creation. As it paints this picture that wisdom was present with God at creation and even before creation began. Now, it begins to emphasize that wisdom is woven into the fabric of this very universe. And it brings about that living wisely means living in harmony with how God designed the world. And then lastly, verses 32 through 36, it has this promise of like those who embrace wisdom finds life and favor from the Lord. But rejecting wisdom leads to self-inflicted harm and leads to destruction. This leads us to the question of why did this matter to the children of Israel in its time? Well, for the children of Israel, wisdom was not something that was abstract philosophy, but it was God's revealed order for life. And Proverbs 8 reinforces that obedience to God aligned them with creation itself. In this proverb, it reminds us that leaders and households, or it reminded the children of Israel that leaders and households that were morally upright, that this order came from God. It did not come from kings, and this order did not come from the culture. Overall, it's just simply this, that wisdom was a public good, and it was essential for justice. It was essential for leadership, and it was essential for communal flourishing. And so, what does this mean for us today? First of all, wisdom competes with loud voices. And secondly, wisdom is rooted in God's design. And three, leadership still requires wisdom. And four, wisdom leads to life. Let's look at that one a little bit more deeper. Wisdom competes with loud voices. In today's world that is filled with opinions, it's filled with trends and misinformation. It is in Proverbs 8 that reminds us that true wisdom still calls out publicly and it cries out clearly. Then secondly, wisdom is rooted in God's design. Life works best when aligned with God's moral and spiritual order. And ignoring wisdom disrupts personal and societal stability. What about for leaders? It says, I said, leaders still require wisdom, whether it's in church, in the family, or in society. Leadership without wisdom only leads to harm. And Proverbs 8 reminds that leaders with authority must submit to God's truth. And so then also with that wisdom, for wisdom leads to life. As the chapter ends with a clear promise, those who love wisdom finds life. Wisdom remains the gracious invitation, not a burden. Here it is. If I can just close it in this way. Wisdom is God's voice inviting us to live in alignment with his design, while foolishness is the choice to ignore him. What is your choice going to be today? I want you to just think about that. Once again, wisdom is God's voice inviting us to live in alignment with his design, while foolishness is the choice. It's the choice to ignore him. Well, this will conclude our reading through Proverbs 8. And be back with us tomorrow as we will experience Proverbs 9 in its entirety. And we'll have some overview information as always. But for now, may God bless you and may God keep you. That is my humble prayer.